In the late 1960s, the San Francisco Bay Area was shaken by a series of mysterious murders that baffled both the police and the public. There was no clear pattern, but most victims were young couples on dates. Each case left behind gruesome evidence, but what was even more terrifying was the presence of letters sent to local newspapers. These letters were signed with a circle and cross symbol, later known as the Zodiac symbol. In his letters, the killer claimed responsibility for several deaths and threatened to kill more people. He demanded public and media attention as if he craved notoriety. Law enforcement felt immense pressure because every investigative effort seemed futile. The public became paranoid, afraid to go out alone or travel at night. In some letters, the Zodiac included ciphers and intricate puzzles, challenging authorities to decode them. These ciphers added another layer of mystery, making the case more infamous. Many people tried to crack the codes, including curious newspaper readers. Local media raced to report every detail received from the Zodiac. The coverage seemed to give the killer satisfaction, as though he were playing a game with both police and the public. Detectives realized the Zodiac was highly intelligent and organized. He appeared to enjoy the attention and chaos he created. Most of his victims were young couples, though his method varied. Sometimes he used firearms, other times knives. There was no clear motive, only psychological gratification. Police formed a special task force to handle the case. They combed through every lead, but the Zodiac always stayed one step ahead. Each new clue seemed to raise more questions than answers. The public began speculating about the Zodiac's identity. Some thought he was a war veteran, others believed he might be a doctor. The mystery captured national attention. His letters became a form of terrifying entertainment for the public. People grew wary of even their neighbors. Many residents kept their home lights on all night. Fear spread across the city, and paranoia became widespread among young people. Families restricted their children from going out at night. Police had to work tirelessly to reassure citizens. But the Zodiac seemed to enjoy the fear. Every threat he wrote demonstrated his cunning. He knew how to control public fear and confuse authorities. The case quickly became both a national and international headline. The first murders officially attributed to the Zodiac occurred in December 1968 when young couple David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen were killed near Vallejo, California. They were on a date, waiting in a parked car when the Zodiac struck with brutal violence. Police found the victims in a gruesome state, but there were no direct witnesses. There were no signs of robbery or other motives, just pure violence. The media immediately covered the story, and fear gripped the community. A few months later, another couple, Darlene Ferrin and Michael Mageau, was attacked in a secluded parking lot. Michael survived, but Darlene was killed. The survivor's account provided crucial clues. He described the perpetrator and the car used during the attack. This information laid the groundwork for the Zodiac's psychological profile. Police began realizing the killer had a specific pattern, but he remained unpredictable. In subsequent letters, the Zodiac claimed responsibility for both attacks. He wrote in a provocative style, seemingly daring the authorities. The first letter sent to newspapers appeared in August 1969. It included a cipher, known as the cipher letter, along with open threats. The Zodiac claimed he would kill more people if the code wasn't published in the newspapers. The media eventually decided to print the contents of the cipher. The public eagerly tried to solve it themselves. Many were drawn in by the thrill and mystery. Some of the ciphers were successfully decoded by puzzle enthusiasts. The messages revealed that the Zodiac enjoyed killing and the attention it brought. Law enforcement felt the pressure of not being able to stop him. The Zodiac seemed to have total control over the situation. He always left clues that frustrated the police. Each new murder heightened public fear. His signature symbol became widely recognized. It appeared in multiple letters and threats sent to newspapers. The media dubbed him the Zodiac Killer, and the name immediately stuck. People discussed him everywhere. Families of victims lived in constant fear. They worried about the next attack. No one felt safe, not even at home. This fear made the public more cautious around strangers. Police scrutinized every lead carefully. Yet the Zodiac always appeared one step ahead. As the summer of 1969 progressed, the Zodiac Killer seemed to grow bolder with each attack, showing no hesitation or fear of being caught. The murders continued to terrorize the San Francisco Bay Area, and the public's anxiety reached unprecedented levels. The killer's letters became more frequent, and each contained cryptic messages designed to provoke authorities and the media. One of his most famous letters included a 408-symbol cipher, which he claimed contained his identity. Newspaper editors across the Bay Area debated whether to publish the cryptic messages, fearing they might incite panic or inadvertently glorify the killer. When the letters appeared in print, the Zodiac achieved exactly what he wanted: widespread attention and fear. People studied every symbol and line of text, desperate to decode the message before the next attack. Amateur cryptographers from across the country attempted to solve the ciphers, some successfully revealing chilling messages about the killer's motives and enjoyment of murder. The police, meanwhile, struggled to interpret these codes, and the public became more obsessed with the mystery. The Zodiac's choice of victims appeared random but showed a calculated understanding of human behavior, especially young couples alone at night. Each crime scene revealed signs of planning, from the selection of location to the timing of the attack. Authorities recognized that the killer's intelligence and cunning made him extremely dangerous. Law enforcement officials, including the Vallejo, Napa, and San Francisco police, coordinated in unprecedented ways, sharing tips and leads across departments. Yet the Zodiac remained elusive, leaving minimal physical evidence. Eyewitnesses were rare, and descriptions varied, making composite sketches unreliable. Despite the growing number of victims, the killer maintained complete control over public perception. The media coverage became a double-edged sword, informing the public but also feeding the Zodiac's desire for fame. Psychologists studied his letters and behavior, attempting to create a profile that could predict future actions. Some suggested he was socially isolated, while others believed he was a manipulative individual who enjoyed games of intellect and terror. The letters often contained threats of more killings, escalating fear in communities across Northern California. Many citizens altered their routines, avoiding remote areas or going out only in groups. Police issued warnings, but the Zodiac seemed unaffected by these measures. Each letter was carefully timed and strategically worded, demonstrating meticulous planning. Public fascination mixed with horror as the story spread nationwide. Amateur sleuths analyzed every letter, creating charts and codes to track potential patterns. The killer seemed to anticipate their efforts, revealing only what he wanted. Over time, the Zodiac's letters became almost as infamous as his murders. The sense of dread persisted long after each crime, and communities lived under constant threat. People began to question their neighbors, their routines, and even their sense of safety. The Zodiac's influence extended beyond his immediate victims, shaping public consciousness for decades. In September 1969, one of the most chilling events occurred when the Zodiac sent letters to 3 major newspapers, claiming responsibility for multiple killings and issuing a chilling challenge. He had created a new cipher that, once solved, would reveal his identity. This was a turning point because it transformed the case from local murders into a media spectacle with national interest. Police departments coordinated intensely, but the Zodiac remained a step ahead at every turn. The letters contained coded messages, seemingly random sequences of letters, numbers, and symbols. Cryptographers, both professional and amateur, pored over the text, attempting to uncover his secrets. The killer seemed to enjoy taunting authorities, often making errors intentionally to mislead investigators. The ciphers also included threats, indicating he would kill again if the letters weren't published. Each message intensified public fear and fascination, creating a sense of urgency among both civilians and police. The killer's writings revealed a deep understanding of human psychology, knowing exactly how to provoke panic and obsession. Analysts noted that he likely had a methodical and organized mind. He exhibited patience, intelligence, and cruelty in equal measure. By this point, the Zodiac had become an almost mythical figure in the public imagination. Stories about him appeared in newspapers nationwide, each report increasing awareness and anxiety. Families of victims struggled with grief and the constant threat of further attacks. The surviving victims provided critical information, describing the killer's vehicle, appearance, and possible behaviors. This helped law enforcement develop profiles and narrow down suspects, but no arrest followed. The killer's letters frequently contained spelling errors or strange grammar, which some believed were deliberate misdirections. The Zodiac clearly understood the media's power and used it to amplify fear. Every publication, every headline, became part of his plan. He was manipulating both the authorities and the public simultaneously. Reports indicated that he sometimes followed the news coverage closely, adjusting his behavior in response. The letters also revealed his obsession with control and attention, almost as if the killings were secondary to the psychological game. Communities became increasingly vigilant, with neighbors reporting suspicious activity. Yet the Zodiac continued to elude capture, leaving minimal traces. Law enforcement increased patrols in areas frequented by couples, but the killer's mobility made him unpredictable. Each crime scene was meticulously selected to minimize detection. Evidence was sparse, and forensic technology of the era limited investigative potential. The public's fear was magnified by the uncertainty, as no one knew when or where the killer would strike next. By late 1969, the Zodiac Killer had firmly established himself as a figure of terror and intrigue across Northern California. His audacity seemed to increase with each letter and attack, making both law enforcement and the public uneasy. The letters now contained explicit threats and increasingly complex ciphers, demonstrating his growing confidence and meticulous planning. Communities were on edge, with residents double-checking locks, avoiding isolated areas, and traveling in groups at night. Some people refused to leave their homes after dark, fearing they might be the next victims. Authorities intensified investigations, pooling resources across multiple counties, but the killer remained elusive. Witness reports were inconsistent, and the few surviving victims offered only limited descriptions of the perpetrator. Composite sketches were distributed, but none led to definitive suspects. The Zodiac's knowledge of criminal procedure suggested he was careful, intelligent, and calculated. Forensic evidence was minimal, making apprehension difficult. He avoided leaving fingerprints or other identifying traces, displaying awareness of police techniques. His choice of victims seemed random but demonstrated an understanding of human behavior, specifically targeting young couples alone at night. Each attack was executed with precision, and yet his letters implied a chaotic, unpredictable personality. Analysts debated whether he was acting alone or part of a larger network, but no evidence supported the latter theory. The media, captivated by his letters, often published them verbatim, increasing both the Zodiac's notoriety and public anxiety. He used these letters to manipulate society, creating a climate of fear that extended far beyond his immediate victims. Families of the murdered struggled with grief while facing the constant threat of further attacks. The killer's communications suggested he derived pleasure not only from murder but from the public's reaction. Psychologists attempted to construct a profile, examining handwriting, syntax, and content of the letters. Some argued he was a loner with sadistic tendencies, while others suspected a highly intelligent individual with the ability to deceive and manipulate. Communities established curfews, youth organizations implemented safety programs, and police held public meetings to advise citizens. Despite all efforts, the Zodiac's patterns remained unpredictable. He was mobile, operating across multiple counties, and used locations that limited witnesses. Law enforcement sometimes discovered evidence too late to act effectively. Each new attack or letter reignited public fear and media frenzy. Letters included references to previous crimes, showing he monitored news coverage closely. He seemed obsessed with public perception, carefully controlling the narrative. The killer also hinted at knowing police procedures, suggesting prior knowledge or research. His communications blurred the lines between criminal action and psychological warfare, leaving the public uncertain and fearful. One of the most infamous moments in the Zodiac case occurred on October 11, 1969, when the killer sent a letter to the San Francisco Chronicle that included the first part of his 340-character cipher, an even more complex puzzle than his previous codes. The letter was accompanied by another chilling message, suggesting he would commit more murders unless his demands were taken seriously. Cryptographers and amateur sleuths across the country eagerly attempted to decode the message, studying the symbols for hours and days on end. The cipher became an obsession for many, with newspapers publishing detailed analyses and theories about its meaning. Some believed the message contained the Zodiac's identity, while others thought it was a taunt designed purely to instill fear. Authorities worked tirelessly to break the code, consulting mathematicians, linguists, and code-breaking experts. Each failure only increased public fascination and the killer's notoriety. Letters continued to arrive, each more daring and provocative than the last. In one, the Zodiac threatened that he would collect more slaves for the afterlife, a statement that terrified the public and intensified police efforts. His writings revealed a disturbing combination of intelligence, cruelty, and obsession with attention. Communities installed streetlights, organized patrols, and implemented neighborhood watches in response. Fear dominated the social atmosphere, and dating couples altered routines or stayed home entirely. Surviving victims offered testimony that helped refine police sketches, though these never resulted in arrests. The Zodiac's calculated communication strategy demonstrated awareness of media impact and human psychology. He carefully selected his words, revealing just enough to provoke fear without giving away his identity. Analysts debated whether the killer was motivated purely by attention, sadistic pleasure, or some deeper psychological drive. His letters contained cryptic references to past murders, demonstrating that he was monitoring the media coverage of his crimes. This awareness reinforced the idea that he was methodical and observant. Police meetings and task force collaborations increased, but the Zodiac remained one step ahead. Each attack, each letter, contributed to the climate of terror he cultivated. Residents avoided walking alone, driving at night, or frequenting isolated areas. The killer's mobility and unpredictability made law enforcement efforts even more challenging. He seemed to enjoy controlling the public narrative, manipulating emotions as much as orchestrating killings. Schoolchildren and teenagers were warned of potential danger, creating a culture of fear. Families invested in security measures and altered daily routines. The Zodiac's combination of cunning, unpredictability, and intelligence made him one of the most enigmatic serial killers in history. His ability to remain undetected, despite widespread attention, frustrated authorities and obsessed the public. Letters were dissected, analyzed, and discussed on radio shows, TV programs, and in newspapers nationwide. Each message increased his mystique and elevated him to a legend of terror. People feared that any encounter could be fatal. The Zodiac's influence extended far beyond his immediate actions, shaping perceptions of crime and safety for decades. In November 1969, the Zodiac Killer escalated his terror by sending a series of letters to multiple newspapers, including the San Francisco Examiner and the Vallejo Times-Herald, taunting police and challenging cryptographers to solve his latest code. He claimed responsibility for previous murders while threatening more violence if his letters were ignored. The public's fear intensified as each new communication suggested he was always watching, always planning, and always steps ahead. Law enforcement departments struggled to coordinate across county lines, as the Zodiac operated across a wide geographic area that included Vallejo, Napa, and San Francisco. Witnesses were few and descriptions were inconsistent, making identification extremely difficult. Some survivors provided fragmented details about the killer's appearance and vehicle, which became part of evolving composite sketches. Despite this, no arrests were made, and the Zodiac continued to manipulate the narrative through the media. Cryptographers devoted countless hours attempting to decode his letters, which were increasingly complex, using unfamiliar symbols and patterns. Each message contained a mix of taunts, threats, and confessions, blending psychological warfare with criminal acts. Public interest skyrocketed, with newspapers publishing detailed accounts of his communications and analysis of his ciphers. Communities organized self-protection measures, including increased vigilance, neighborhood watches, and public safety meetings. Couples changed their dating habits, avoiding isolated areas and nighttime outings. The Zodiac seemed to derive pleasure from this societal disruption, feeding on fear as much as infamy. Police task forces consulted psychologists to understand his motivations and possible identity. Some experts theorized he was a socially isolated individual with a fascination for control and attention. Others suggested he was methodical, with knowledge of law enforcement procedures and criminal investigation techniques. Each attack appeared calculated, including choice of location, timing, and method. The killer's letters demonstrated meticulous planning, with deliberate misspellings and phrasing to confuse investigators. His communications included symbolic threats and hints about previous crimes, indicating that he closely followed media reports. Analysts believed he enjoyed the power of controlling both public perception and police response. Neighborhoods implemented safety measures, like street patrols and security cameras, yet the Zodiac remained elusive. Police tried surveillance of potential targets, but his randomness made prediction nearly impossible. The press debated ethical responsibility. Publishing letters gave him attention, but ignoring them risked ignoring evidence. The killer's ciphers became legendary among amateur cryptographers, with some claiming to have cracked parts of the codes. His ability to manipulate the media while committing violent crimes was unprecedented. Families of victims were left in constant fear, unsure if their loved ones were safe. The Zodiac's reign of terror dominated public consciousness, creating a climate of suspicion and anxiety. His continued elusiveness made him a subject of obsession and terror across Northern California. During the same period, survivors of Zodiac attacks provided essential clues, yet their testimonies often led to more questions than answers. Michael Mageau, who survived an attack in July 1969, offered descriptions of the killer's physical appearance, clothing, and vehicle. His account became critical to investigators, forming a foundation for multiple composite sketches. Despite these efforts, the Zodiac remained uncaptured, demonstrating a mastery of planning and evasion. His letters often referenced previous victims, proving he monitored media coverage closely and strategically selected his targets. Police developed profiles suggesting the killer was highly intelligent, socially isolated, and capable of extreme manipulation. Psychologists noted he appeared to enjoy creating fear and uncertainty, rather than seeking material gain. The public became hyper-aware, often suspecting neighbors or strangers of being the Zodiac. This pervasive paranoia contributed to the killer's psychological impact, extending fear beyond his immediate victims. Investigators faced immense pressure from both the public and the media to solve the case quickly. Letters containing cryptic messages were scrutinized extensively, with experts analyzing each symbol, punctuation mark, and phrasing for meaning. The Zodiac's ciphers remained largely unsolved, adding to his notoriety and mystique. Media outlets debated whether publishing the codes encouraged his behavior or aided police in capturing him. Communities responded with increased vigilance, installing lights, organizing patrols, and advising youth on safety precautions. Despite the heightened awareness, the killer's attacks continued sporadically, demonstrating both boldness and meticulous planning. Each new murder and letter fueled media frenzy, public obsession, and police scrutiny. Authorities coordinated multi-jurisdictional task forces, pooling resources and sharing intelligence. Yet every lead seemed to dissipate, as the Zodiac stayed ahead. Letters often included symbolic threats, demonstrating an obsession with control and psychological dominance. Analysts suggested the killer's behaviors reflected a desire for recognition, attention, and fear as much as actual murder. Survivors' testimonies helped narrow suspect descriptions but never led to capture. The Zodiac's mobility, timing, and selection of victims showcased his tactical acumen. Police reviewed previous crimes for patterns, hoping to predict future attacks. Communities alternated between panic and resilience, implementing measures to protect themselves. Public fascination with the case grew nationally, with newspapers, radio, and television covering every development. Each letter seemed designed to inspire fear while showcasing the killer's intellect. The Zodiac's actions blurred the line between criminal violence and psychological warfare. Citizens were advised to travel in pairs or groups and avoid isolated areas entirely. Even in daylight, couples remained cautious, altering habits and routines. Despite exhaustive investigation, no one was ever definitively linked to the crimes. The killer's continued success in evasion amplified his legend, making the Zodiac a symbol of terror for generations. And television covering every development. As 1969 drew to a close, the Zodiac Killer's infamy spread far beyond Northern California, capturing national and even international attention. His letters and ciphers had transformed him from a local menace into a symbol of terror and mystery. Each new communication was carefully crafted to provoke fear, manipulate media coverage, and challenge both police and the public. Cryptographers, hobbyists, and professionals alike worked tirelessly to decipher his complex codes, analyzing every letter, symbol, and spacing for meaning. Some portions were solved, revealing chilling messages about his enjoyment of murder and the attention he received. Yet, despite these breakthroughs, the killer's true identity remained unknown, shrouded in secrecy and elusiveness. Communities adopted heightened vigilance, installing streetlights, organizing neighborhood watches, and instructing children and teenagers to stay indoors after dark. Police departments coordinated cross-county investigations, sharing leads, sketches, and descriptions of potential suspects. However, the Zodiac's intelligence and meticulous planning rendered these efforts largely ineffective. Survivors provided critical insights into the killer's appearance, voice, and vehicle, but even these were insufficient for capture. The letters contained deliberate misspellings and cryptic phrasing, suggesting the Zodiac's understanding of linguistics and human behavior. He seemed to enjoy the psychological game as much as the physical acts of violence. Media coverage amplified his notoriety, effectively turning the killer into a household name. Authorities faced mounting pressure from both the public and local government to resolve the case quickly. Communities lived in constant fear, as no one felt safe alone, even during daylight hours. The Zodiac's ability to remain hidden despite widespread attention frustrated investigators and intrigued the public. Each attack or letter reinforced the perception that he was always in control, always observing, and always one step ahead. Analysts suggested he was socially isolated yet highly intelligent, using his communications to manipulate emotions and public perception. The letters often referenced previous crimes, indicating the killer closely monitored media reports and public reaction. His mobility across multiple counties added complexity, making prediction and apprehension difficult. Families of victims were traumatized, coping with grief while fearing future attacks. Local law enforcement expanded investigations to include interviews, stakeouts, and surveillance operations in hopes of catching him. Despite these efforts, every new letter proved his cunning and audacity. The Zodiac's impact extended far beyond the immediate crimes, instilling a sense of paranoia across Northern California. He had effectively weaponized fear, using letters and media attention as tools of psychological terror. Public fascination mixed with horror, creating a cultural phenomenon around his identity and motives. No one could predict his next move, heightening tension and anxiety. Each unsolved case added layers to the mystery, increasing the killer's mythos. Analysts debated whether he acted alone or had outside help, but evidence always pointed to a solitary, meticulous perpetrator. In early 1970, the Zodiac Killer maintained his pattern of communication, continuing to taunt authorities with letters containing cryptic ciphers, threats, and personal admissions of murder. The letters' tone ranged from menacing to mocking, demonstrating a disturbing mixture of arrogance and psychological manipulation. Each message included symbolic threats, sometimes referencing astrology, numbers, or cryptographic puzzles, which further complicated law enforcement efforts. Communities remained on high alert, altering daily routines, avoiding isolated areas, and implementing protective measures. Police task forces worked tirelessly, attempting to cross-reference reports, sketches, and eyewitness accounts across multiple jurisdictions. Despite the immense pressure, no arrests were made, and the Zodiac continued to evade capture. Survivors' testimonies provided fragmented descriptions, but the killer's ability to move unpredictably and blend into the population made apprehension nearly impossible. Cryptographers and amateur sleuths obsessively analyzed letters, hoping to solve ciphers that might reveal his identity. Some partial solutions indicated disturbing psychological traits, including a desire for control, attention, and fear-mongering. Media outlets debated whether publishing letters encouraged his behavior or assisted authorities in tracking him. Public fear and fascination grew simultaneously, creating a heightened sense of vigilance and paranoia. Families of victims faced both grief and ongoing anxiety, unsure if they or others would become targets. Investigators noted patterns in the Zodiac's behavior, suggesting he chose victims for both accessibility and psychological satisfaction. Letters referenced previous murders, demonstrating that he monitored news coverage closely. The killer's intelligence, patience, and meticulous planning became evident in every communication. Analysts suggested he may have been socially isolated yet highly manipulative, capable of understanding human behavior and exploiting fear. Communities implemented safety programs, but the Zodiac's mobility and randomness made prediction nearly impossible. Police expanded surveillance, stakeouts, and investigations across multiple counties. Each letter fueled public obsession and media coverage, amplifying his notoriety. The Zodiac's influence reached beyond his immediate victims, creating a culture of fear and suspicion. Authorities worked tirelessly, often following leads that proved dead ends, while the killer remained free. Letters continued to arrive sporadically, each designed to provoke, confuse, and instill dread. The killer's ability to manipulate perception and terrorize communities was unprecedented. Analysts debated whether attention, sadistic pleasure, or some deeper psychological compulsion motivated his actions. Survivors' insights became critical, but forensic limitations hindered definitive identification. Public safety campaigns emphasized vigilance, traveling in groups, and avoiding isolated areas. Despite exhaustive efforts, the Zodiac's identity remained hidden, and his mythos grew with every unsolved crime. His communications blurred the lines between criminality and psychological warfare, leaving communities and authorities in perpetual fear. By mid-1970, the Zodiac Killer's reign of terror had left an indelible mark on Northern California, with communities living in constant fear of his next move. The letters continued to arrive, containing cryptic messages, ciphers, and explicit threats of murder. Police departments across Vallejo, San Francisco, Napa, and surrounding counties coordinated investigations, sharing leads, sketches, and witness reports. Despite these efforts, the Zodiac remained elusive, demonstrating remarkable cunning and knowledge of law enforcement procedures. Survivors' accounts provided partial descriptions of the killer, including clothing, height, build, and the vehicle used during attacks. These details helped refine composite sketches, yet no arrests followed. His letters often referenced prior crimes, showing he monitored media coverage carefully and thrived on public attention. Cryptographers, journalists, and amateurs alike dedicated countless hours to decoding his complex symbols. Some ciphers revealed disturbing messages about his motivations, including sadistic pleasure and a fascination with fear. Communities implemented safety measures such as neighborhood watches, street patrols, and personal security precautions. Couples altered routines, avoiding isolated areas and traveling in groups at night. Families of victims lived in perpetual anxiety, fearing that anyone could be next. Analysts studying his letters concluded he possessed high intelligence, patience, and meticulous planning skills. His communications demonstrated psychological manipulation, blurring the line between crime and terror propaganda. Police task forces relied on forensic evidence, eyewitness accounts, and investigative profiles, yet the Zodiac's mobility and unpredictability thwarted capture. Public fascination intensified, fueled by media coverage and sensationalized reporting. Each new letter heightened fear while showcasing his intelligence and audacity. Citizens remained hyper-vigilant, constantly scanning for suspicious activity. The killer's ability to manipulate perception, control public fear, and evade detection was unparalleled. Authorities debated strategies to anticipate his movements or identify patterns in his attacks. Letters sometimes included deliberate errors or obscure references to mislead investigators. Communities organized educational programs, teaching children and teenagers about personal safety. Yet the Zodiac continued to strike unpredictably, leaving behind minimal evidence. His legacy of fear was amplified with each unsolved crime. Public obsession with his identity grew as the media circulated every detail of his communications. Families, investigators, and cryptographers were united in a mix of terror and intrigue. The Zodiac's combination of intelligence, cruelty, and strategic manipulation made him one of the most enigmatic figures in criminal history. Citizens struggled to maintain normal routines, knowing danger could strike at any time. Authorities pursued every lead, no matter how small, but the killer's evasive nature continued to frustrate them. The legend of the Zodiac Killer was firmly cemented in public consciousness. Towards the end of 1970, the Zodiac Killer's letters took on a more provocative tone, taunting police with cryptic puzzles and bold threats while confessing to murders in chilling detail. Each communication was designed to demonstrate power, intellect, and a perverse sense of control over both the authorities and the public. His ciphers became increasingly complex, often combining letters, symbols, and numbers in ways that challenge even expert cryptographers. The media published the letters widely, bringing nationwide attention and creating a climate of fear that extended far beyond the immediate areas of his crimes. Communities implemented curfews, organized night patrols, and established protocols for dating couples to avoid isolation. Families lived under constant stress, worried that the next attack could target someone they knew. Police departments coordinated efforts across jurisdictions, comparing eyewitness descriptions, forensic evidence, and letter analyses to identify patterns. Yet the Zodiac's mobility, unpredictability, and knowledge of investigative techniques kept him free. Survivors' accounts provided glimpses of his appearance, vehicle, and behavior, but these clues were insufficient for capture. Analysts suggested the killer was socially isolated yet highly intelligent, using letters as tools for manipulation and psychological control. Each cryptic message amplified public fascination while deepening fear, creating a sense of omnipresence for the Zodiac. He monitored media coverage, adapting his communications to provoke reactions and maintain dominance over public perception. Investigators scrutinized every word, symbol, and punctuation mark for insight into his identity. Communities implemented educational programs, teaching citizens to recognize suspicious activity and remain vigilant. The Zodiac's letters often contained threats that implied meticulous planning and observation. Public paranoia increased, and ordinary routines were disrupted by fear of being targeted. His combination of cunning, cruelty, and intelligence made him an enigmatic figure in law enforcement history. Police considered multiple suspects, including men with prior criminal histories, but none were conclusively linked. Each unsolved crime reinforced the mythos surrounding the Zodiac, blurring the line between reality and legend. Analysts debated whether the killer's primary motive was attention, psychological gratification, or a combination of both. Survivors' stories were crucial, offering behavioral insights that informed profiles and investigative strategy. The Zodiac's ability to manipulate media coverage and public fear was unprecedented. Communities adopted long-term safety measures, including neighborhood watches and increased public awareness. Despite heightened law enforcement efforts, his pattern remained unpredictable and his identity unknown. The killer's letters continued to arrive sporadically, each carefully timed and crafted. Authorities were challenged to anticipate his next move while maintaining public safety. Families, investigators, and journalists were bound together by a mix of fear, fascination, and desperation. The Zodiac's crimes and communications left a lasting psychological impact on Northern California. His legend persisted, evolving with each unsolved letter and mysterious murder. Citizens feared even the most ordinary moments could become deadly. Investigators remained committed to solving the case, but the killer's cunning and intelligence made him nearly untouchable. The Zodiac's reign of terror was defined not only by murder but by the pervasive psychological control he exercised through letters, ciphers, and media manipulation. His identity remained a mystery, solidifying his status as one of the most infamous and enigmatic serial killers in American history. As 1971 approached, the Zodiac Killer's legend continued to grow, fueled by his continued communication and the enduring mystery of his identity. Despite extensive investigations, he remained elusive, leaving law enforcement frustrated and the public terrified. His letters now combined taunts, cryptic codes, and confessions, creating an aura of psychological warfare around every crime he committed. Communities remained on high alert, with couples avoiding isolated areas and families taking extraordinary measures to protect themselves. Authorities coordinated multi-county task forces, sharing information on sightings, vehicles, and behavioral patterns. Each new lead was followed meticulously, but the killer's mobility and strategic planning kept him one step ahead. Survivors' testimonies provided fragmented but critical information, helping to create sketches and psychological profiles. The letters often contained cryptic references to past attacks, demonstrating that he monitored media coverage closely. Analysts suggested that the Zodiac's intelligence allowed him to manipulate both public perception and law enforcement responses. Each attack and letter reinforced the sense that he was always watching, always planning, and always in control. The ciphers became legendary, challenging cryptographers and amateur sleuths alike. Some partial solutions revealed horrifying messages, confirming the killer's sadistic enjoyment of fear and attention. Communities installed lights, organized patrols, and reinforced security, yet the killer continued to elude capture. Media coverage intensified, with newspapers, radio, and television analyzing every letter and code. The Zodiac's ability to manipulate media attention became a key aspect of his psychological strategy. Families of victims lived under continuous stress, fearing that anyone could be next. Police increased surveillance, but his unpredictability and careful planning frustrated investigators. Letters were carefully timed, containing threats and cryptic instructions that provoked fear and curiosity. Analysts debated whether he acted alone or had assistance, but evidence consistently suggested a solitary, meticulous perpetrator. Communities developed a heightened awareness of unusual behavior, but paranoia often led to false alarms. The Zodiac's legacy of terror extended beyond immediate victims, creating a lasting impact on public perception. Each communication was designed to demonstrate intelligence, control, and a perverse pleasure in fear-mongering. Police and media struggled to balance public safety with responsible reporting. Survivors' accounts were crucial, offering clues about the killer's appearance, vehicle, and mannerisms. Despite this, no arrests were made, and the letters continued to arrive sporadically. The Zodiac's influence shaped both criminal investigation methods and public consciousness about serial killers. His communications blurred the lines between crime, media manipulation, and psychological warfare. Each new unsolved case strengthened the mythos surrounding him. Public fear, fascination, and obsession intertwined, creating a culture dominated by the legend of the Zodiac. In 1971, the Zodiac Killer continued his campaign, sending letters that included new cryptic ciphers, veiled threats, and references to prior murders, keeping both law enforcement and the public on edge. His ability to elude capture while maintaining public attention created a climate of perpetual fear. Communities remained hyper-vigilant, implementing safety measures and altering daily routines. Couples avoided secluded locations, families reinforced home security, and authorities conducted exhaustive investigations. Each letter was carefully timed to maximize psychological impact, blending confessions with taunts, cryptography, and symbolic threats. Survivors provided partial descriptions of the killer, offering glimpses into his appearance, clothing, and vehicle, but these details were insufficient for apprehension. Analysts suggested the Zodiac was highly intelligent, socially isolated, and obsessed with psychological control. His communications demonstrated deliberate